Hi, y'all. Welcome to the Creative Artrepreneur panel. This is the March panelists, and we're super excited to get started today and tell you all about these amazing entrepreneurs that we have here. So for today, we have the amazing William, creative facilitator. We also have Myles, creative strategist, and Jilly, environmental strategist. So we're all talking about strategy and doing what we can with what we know and making it the best possible. I am so excited to get started, and I am going to kick it off to William, passing you the mic. Introduce yourself and also answer the question, what does creativity mean to you?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with this Artrepreneurs panel. My name's William Fogarty. I am a creative facilitator, creative consultant, and a real creative individual. So I like to lay it out at all those different levels. That means primarily facilitating events, workshops, also being a creative consultant on creative process. Creativity to me means a lot of different things at the personal, professional, and collective levels. But I'll just simply say that I think creativity is a means of improving our lives by connecting to greater well-being, greater health, and ultimately greater sanity in the world, which is much needed. So that's a little about me and my perceptions of creativity. Happy to be here.
Thank you, William. Passing the mic to Catherine, please introduce yourself and answer the question, what does creativity mean to you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Myles. I'm out here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am a multi-hyphenated creative. I'm a creative strategist. I am a dance instructor. I am a nonprofit co-founder, and I'm also a cosmic consultant. And creativity to me is really just plugging into your passions and really having fun with it and allowing that to just come alive in your life and in your spaces, in your connections, and just really as far as it can go. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Catherine. And passing the mic to Jilly, please introduce yourself and answer the question, what does creativity mean to you?
Thanks so much, Drea. Thanks, Catherine and William, for introducing yourselves. I like hearing how you talk about yourselves. My name is Jillian Rappaport, and I am based in Rockaway Beach, Queens in New York City, although I'm currently in Portland, Oregon, working on some projects. I can tell you a little about myself. So I'm an artist and a researcher and a writer, and I create striking nature stories in the age of climate crisis. Generally, I'm exploring relationships between sensuality, co-authorship, and personal mythologies. And I use methods from design thinking, cultural strategy, herbalism, and participatory art. So, but overall, my work is really about imagining a future that is nature-centered and utopian. And we can talk a little more about that later. So what does creativity mean to me? So when I think about creativity, actually, the person who really comes to mind is Audre Lorde. And I think about Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, and particularly the idea of the erotic, because the erotic is so connected to our creativity and and I think especially the way that Audre Lorde describes this, like the beginning of our sense of self, and like the space between the beginning of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings, and this sort of like internal sense of satisfaction that, like, once we have experienced that, we know we can aspire to this like greater sense. And so I really think about that sense of like tapping into that erotic sensibility as a source of power, as really the sense of like my understanding of creativity. And I think there's so much power in creativity, now in our capacity to collaborate and to co-create the stories that are like most truthful about our world, particularly with people who have been marginalized and have been sort of excluded from the narratives of dominant society. So I think creativity has this incredible power to help us like rewrite the stories for the age that we're in today.
Thank you, Jilly. That was awesome. I loved the way that you framed that. We're going to get started with the first question. So, how did you get started and what were your biggest milestones up until now? Passing the mic to William.
Hi, yeah, that's a great question. The way that I got started was I attended a creative problem solving institute called SIPSI, and it was really transformational for me to get to experience creative energy and creative process, creative facilitation, and I just fell in love with it. It was a desire to spend my life dedicated to promoting and helping with the evolution of creativity and creative process throughout the world and also within ourselves. So some of my biggest milestones have been graduating with my master's degree. I have been facilitating at different creativity conferences such as SIPSI and the Creativity Expert Exchange, and also recently doing a demonstration of a problem-solving technology known as playstorming to a group of individuals at my alma mater, SUNY Buffalo State.
Thank you. That's so cool. I learned something new about you. So there you go. Always learning something. And I'm going to pass the mic to Catherine. How did you get started and what were the biggest milestones up until now?
I'm trying to think of where it started, because it's been a journey for sure. But part of the start was my desire to leave Oklahoma City, where I'm from, and move to Arizona. And on my way to there, while I was working on getting out here, my dad was running for Attorney General in 2018, and he wanted me to stay and work as his digital outreach director. So I said yes, and that was my first opportunity to apply all of the skills that I had learned at school from Oklahoma State, where I studied strategic communication. So I was able to manage all of their social platforms, from design to scheduling to engagement. But I was also on the campaign trail. So I was organizing all of the events, all of the fundraisers, all of the community groups that we would meet up with. And we did the 77 strong tour. So we covered all 77 counties in the state. And then I moved out here and I went to a business networking group called 1 Million Cups. And I met a woman out here who was mentoring me for a little bit. And I was able to do my first communications audit for her. And then that was right around the start of the pandemic. And I was working as a catering specialist downtown. So events were like the first thing to go. So I found myself unemployed and I knew I always wanted to start my own business. And I started working with my aunt, who is a health and wellness coach, and she has a health and wellness movement called Vibrantly Living You. And I also, around that same time, connected with our communications director from the campaign, who connected me with Yale. And I joined the co right around that time too. And since then, just like magic has been following me ever since. We did the Artist Way together with Yale and Drea. And that's when I discovered how big astrology is in my life. It's definitely something that I've loved since I was in high school. And that's its own journey and story. But really, that was like a little over a year ago. And since then, this whole last year has been full of like all of these creative experiences and opportunities for me. My co-founder Derek Brown, our co-founder for the Oklahoma Center for Racial Equity and Justice, reached out to me in March of last year. So we've been working on this project for a year now. And it's a super, super special project to me because I'm very passionate about social justice. So that was a huge milestone. And then through this whole last year, I've started teaching my own dance classes. I've started teaching my own astrology classes. And I also offer creative or communication audits for my clients as well. So lots of steps along the way, but it has definitely been a magical journey.
Thank you, Catherine. You are the epitome of a multifaceted creative in every sense of the word. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass the mic to Jilly and would love to hear about how you got started and what were your biggest milestones up until now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm loving hearing these journeys. There's so many facets. It's inspiring. Yeah, so how did I get my start? I mean, since I was a kid, I have a book that I wrote when I was like an 8-year-old kid about foraging berries in the woods and an adventure story. So I try to kind of release some of the ideas that we have to like start as adults and just try to kind of like shed some of that and realize like we've kind of always been who we are. That's been a lot of my journey, is sort of trying to recognize that and shed what I can to come back to myself. But that being said, I have had many steps and many teachers to thank along the way. So yeah, let's see. When I was in school, I studied political social movements. I was really interested in like the signage around the 60s and 70s and like feminist performance art, like people using their bodies in public spaces just to communicate messages. And that led me into the art world. I was kind of, doing kind of scrappy curation of shows here and there and in kind of unexpected places. And then eventually ended up meeting a creative director when I was early in that part of my career, who invited me to be the assistant for a creative studio called Mother New York, which does a lot of graphic design work. And I got in there and sort of as an administrative assistant and was supporting the design team, this incredible team of designers. And I got to really learn the ins and outs of running a creative studio by assisting him. And I would just loved being in this environment surrounded by so many like just different visual ideas on the walls and people exploring ideas constantly and arguing and like just going through it together. I was there for 4.5 years. While I was there, I learned that I wanted to come up with more ideas myself. So I found a mentor in the space who trained me to be a strategist in my like late night hours. And eventually they hired me to be a strategist there. And that was the beginning of my career as a strategist. And I worked there for a while. And then I went to another agency that was more communications focused. And then I went freelance. And when I went freelance, I started working with a lot of with friends of mine who were just like starting to create businesses. A very close friend of mine named Al Fine was at the time starting a business called Dame Products. And I was the strategist on that original campaign for their first Kickstarter campaign, and we created some of the foundation of what is still their messaging now. Almost 8 years later. Some of the ideas around closing the pleasure gap. Dame Products does sexual wellness, and they were at the time They were the first sex toy on Kickstarter. Anyway, that led to a lot of other like kind of wellness oriented projects and in my own kind of independent practice. And at the same time, I started studying herbalism, and I wrote a series of field guides with a teacher of mine, and that led to a lot of the nature work. And I'm realizing I'm taking a lot of time with this journey. It's been quite a journey. But yeah, there's that's sort of when my practice started like hybridizing more and going from this like part of it being this like design strategy and research element, and part of it being this like nature storytelling element. And that's really come together in a really big way over the last year when I started an MFA program at Portland State University in art and social practice, which really brings together my interest and focus in nature and storytelling with my kind of like community participatory art and like design strategy and thinking work. And so currently working to like develop and weave all of these together and into like a more cohesive practice. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jilly. That was amazing. I love your inspiring story. It gets me so excited to hear about all the things you've done and all the possibilities there are out there. You really led by your heart, and I appreciate that a lot. We're going to move on to our second roundtable question. So, how do you ensure your clients get the maximum value out of your expertise? I'm going to pass the mic to Catherine. I'd love to hear what you have to say with this.
So I think the number one thing is listening skills. And that's another shout out to the Co, because after we finished The Artist Way, we did the listening path by Julia Cameron. And I learned how to really listen to everything better, from our environment to ourselves, to other people, to beyond the veil and to silence. My favorite part of the listening path was listening to the wind. But for clients, I think it's really important to really hear what they're saying when it comes to their pain points, their situation, their problem at hand, and then really kind of connecting those dots in terms of how I can offer my services, skills, and expertise to tailor and fit to what their needs are, based on what they bring to me.
Thank you, Catherine. Passing the mic over to Jilly. How do you ensure your clients get the maximum value out of your expertise?
That's such a good question. I definitely agree with what you said, Catherine, about listening. So important. I would say, yeah, I generally do start with making sure that I'm really understanding the ins and outs of where they are at in their journey, the work that they've done so far, especially in terms of connecting with their community and like who they believe that they are connecting with, and in what capacity they believe they can, and like what that bridge is starting to look like. And then I really try to make sure that there's an understanding of the sort of like diversity of skills and experiences that I have had, so that there's like a sort of fertile ground for us to like jump off into a lot of different directions. And I think a big piece of it is trying to find that like sweet spot to build together in a small way first, to build trust and build some processes for collaboration, and then allow like the natural sort of like growth to occur from there. So oftentimes I find that, we start with a research project of understanding who their customer is, doing interviews, like really trying to get through the ins and outs of who that customer base is, who that community is, and how to connect. And then, I think there's like having ongoing conversations about possibilities for other forms of collaboration, whether that's about like building narratives together, or it's about building a website or some sort of form of like of art together, or some form of communication together, and then being open to the opportunities as they unfold, and just being ready to talk about how that collaboration could work and what it could look like. And being, I think also a big part of it is willing to be, as much as possible, willing to be vulnerable and not precious with kind of the ideas, and believing in like an iterative process. And just saying, I'm not sure that this is right, but I'm putting this down on paper because I want to hear what you think about it. Allows people to feel comfortable and just say like, I hate this. But then when they say that, you start to hear what they do like, and just allowing that like ego preciousness to to shift and change a little bit. So yeah. But yeah, I think it's a balance of like being in it with them in that like place, but also making sure there's a clear understanding of what they really need and what capacities I can really serve them. So yeah, walking all those lines together.
Thank you, Jilly. What an amazing response. I totally agree. I'm going to pass the mic to William. How do you ensure your clients get the maximum value out of your expertise?
First off, I want to say I love what was just shared about listening and collaboration. I think effective collaboration and also, your own emotional management in the creativity field is something that's wildly important and very undervalued. So being able to have the emotional skills to detach from perceived slights to your ideas or criticism or constructive feedback, it can be really hard to be that vulnerable, but with practice and with time and maturity, it really becomes such a different experience of receiving and being open to feedback and genuinely curious and desiring it. Outside of that, I think one of the things that I love to do is integrate research and practice. So and research can have different aspects to it. There can be the scientific method, which is, one of the famed westernized forms of research. And then there's also traditions that are thousands of years old, with the research of individuals using their minds, bodies, and spirits to experience transformation. So integrating that sort of theory and those sort of different bodies of research with current applied practice. What can you do in your life today, right now, that can connect you to greater levels of well-being, that can facilitate greater clarity in your mind and in your life and bring you closer to the true being that you know you are inside. So I think really collaboration and integration are the two keys to, being successful and working with clients for me.
Thank you, William. You're so wise. I always learn something new when I speak to you. Thank you so much for that. So good. I'm going to pass the mic to Jillian. So this is your expert question. I can't wait to see you expert explain this. You just know so much. I want to just dive in. Explain ESG and why a business needs it.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm excited to talk about it. So yeah, ESG means environmental, social, and governance factors that help evaluate the company's basically progress towards sustainability. So basically data can be acquired against those different metrics, and then it's often like integrated in storytelling, especially involved in sharing storytelling about the company with investors or even their broader community. And from an environmental perspective, the factors can include it can include any sort of like advancements that company is making toward climate change, whether that has to do with, greenhouse gas emissions or waste management or energy efficiency. It can really, it's really, I think the UN Sustainable Development Goals is a really good place to look at the range of ways that those factors can be addressed. I think, decarbonization and just cutting emissions in general and also land use are some of the more important places and broader categories that I think are important for companies to be looking at. And then, of course, on top of that, there's the social factors as well, which include human rights, labor standards and supply chain, anything around illegal child labor, more routine issues like workplace health and safety. And then in governance, it's more around the rights and responsibilities and expectations around the specific governance of the corporation or the business. And so, yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with these questions of how does your broader message that you're communicating to your public actually get activated on an operational every single day, practical, pragmatic level as an organization. And I think that that's kind of like the meat of the truth in communicating around these things these days, because there's so much greenwashing going on right now that and customers are so highly in tune to that as well. Like communities are just like very people are just very wary of false messaging. So being able to I used to have a mentor who talked about this idea of visionary pragmatism in crafting messages, this blend of vision on one side and the more pragmatic and practical on the other side, and being able to really support everything that's being said from a visionary like belief about the future world standpoint with like practical, grounded product level truths. And so I think talking about ESG and like the metrics involved in ESG is a really good framework for establishing that the truth of that kind of message. So yeah, I would say that's I think that one other thing I'll add is that I think that around this this topic, something that I find really frustrating around environmentalism sort of messaging in the world is that there's a lot of doom and gloom. There's just a lot of like terrifying truth out there. And it's not that that's not, obviously that's true, that we are in a real crisis on many levels, obviously, as we all are highly aware. At the same time, I do really believe that it's possible for us to hold those truths and at the same time approach them with a real sense of freshness and optimism. And I believe that like storytelling has this capacity to really evangelize people in the direction of stewardship, and that we don't have to like the terrifying like doom and gloom messages just really, I think they stop people in their tracks and create this like real sense of apathy in the world, because people genuinely don't know what to do with the mounting fear. So yeah, I think the reality is that we as storytellers have this capacity to take that ESG, those like metrics, and turn them into really like compelling stories that give us hope, that give us optimism, that give us, because the realities are that this is an incredible opportunity. We're at this moment of incredible opportunity to grow and change together and make this new world, aligned with like the values that have shifted so much. So yeah, so I think it's an important thing to think about, not just establishing the ESG framework, but storytelling in a way around it that really can offer a sense of hope and evangelize people in the direction of productive change.
Really so beautifully stated. And I love your silver lining. It is not all about doom and gloom. There's a lot of positivity to hone in on. And I love that perspective. So William, your expert question is next. And as an expert events facilitator, I am so excited to see what you have to say. So what are the benefits of a business hosting an event?
Thank you for that wonderful question. I think there is definitely some nuance to that question in terms of resources, in terms of objectives, and making sure that all of that aligns into putting on an event that everyone is on board with and that everyone can fully participate in and be present for. So with that slight caveat, since events is kind of a general topic and it might not always be in one's best interest to host an event, under the circumstances that it is, I think there's a lot of benefits that come along with it, especially in the field of creativity. So one of the things that I learned from my master's program at SUNY Buffalo State is that it is so important to have an expert facilitator of a meeting so that they can control the process and stay out of the content. That allows for the experts in whatever field that they're in to be able to free themselves up creatively, to free up that mental space, to not worry about the logistics and, you know, the timing and all of that, to take that load off or that burden off and be able to have someone expert be able to do it and make it more engaging and interactive. So that's one aspect. Another dimension is the participant engagement and enjoyment, which I was kind of alluding to. A lot of times, you know, if you're on a team, you've got a same flow, you do the same thing, you come in, you're all sitting, no one's moving, you're not breathing, maybe you're not even particularly happy to be there. Bringing in a facilitator can really energize, can bring new perspectives, and can give you some tools that you can carry on afterwards. It gives an opportunity for learning, for seeing and reimagining the way that a meeting can be run or an event can be run. And then finally, I think there's something to be said about inspiration. Inspiration, not just at the level of productivity and being inspired to do more, but also the inspiration for what can be applied in everyday life. So if you are doing, say, one of my creativity and well-being facilitations, the outcomes are always that they can have enhanced creative output by connecting to creative flow. So have some sort of ability to sustain their creativity better. And then also in addition to that, it's like being able to be more connected to those own inner resources of creativity transcends what you're able to produce at work. It influences how you interact with your family. It interacts with how you feel after you get off the Zoom call or you get out of the meeting, and it can translate to the rest of your life outside of what's happening in this event. So to sum it all up, if an event is aligned with, you know, your different criteria, if you feel like you need new inspiration, you want someone to introduce new tools and techniques, and you see the value of having someone being able to lead a meeting for you for the outcomes that you want to get, which in my case would be creativity, output, productivity, and well-being, then that's the perfect scenario for you to make that investment, not only in your team in the present moment, but also the future of your team moving forward.
William, I loved everything you said. It is absolutely true. As an event facilitator myself, I appreciate those insights immensely. Thank you. Okay, we're on to you, Catherine. Your expert question. I am so excited to hear what you have to say. So why is a communications audit worth the investment?
Thank you for the expert question, Drea. And I just want to say I'm so inspired by both of you. And I just had to put that out there because you guys are both incredible. So the value of a communications audit is really to set the foundation of where you're at with your business in terms of communications. There are a lot of different ways to communicate as a business, whether it's through social media or a newsletter or, you know, email marketing, etc. There's so many different methods. And I think when you don't come from a communications background, you might kind of get lost in the sauce, or you might not know how to connect each of these areas. Maybe you think like each method needs a different strategy and you're like putting different efforts into different places and stuff like that. So what the communications audit does is it takes all of that information and it assesses what your methods are, what your processes are for each of those methods, and then it kind of puts it all into one place so that you're able to look at it like, oh, okay, I didn't realize we were doing it like that, or maybe this did not need this much attention in this area and we need to shift and focus on this instead. So it really just gives you that blueprint and idea of what you're working with and where you want to go with it. And it also identifies your key areas, some things that you should know as a business, but maybe you're not considering. It throws that in there. It offers a SWOT analysis, so you're able to understand your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then finally, it puts together recommendations on what to do with all of that information. And it gives you a direction to take all of that information, but it also gives you an opportunity to bring it back. So it's like you try this strategy, you see how it goes, and then based on that, you can come back to the audit, whether it was successful or not, what needs to be changed or what can be added to strengthen those strategies is really the value. And yeah, I had the opportunity to offer an audit for my own nonprofit, OCREJ, and we've been going off of these recommendations for a year now. So it's really cool to come back to now and see all of the progress that we've done just based off of those recommendations. So it's a really great tool to get started, whether you're just starting your business or you've been running for a while, and you're able to just take that kind of pause to say, okay, where are we at? Let's have an audit and just assess the situation and then move forward from there. So it's a really helpful and powerful tool that I like to offer for myself and then for others as well.
Thank you for that offering. I absolutely love it. It is so great to have all those insights and then still be using it a year later and beyond. Just shows the value, and that is amazing. I definitely get really excited every single time you talk about it. So thank you for that thorough explanation. We are moving on to questions and answers. And my first question is for Jilly from our InCreative co-founder, Yelly. So Jilly, are there strategists that stop with ESG and a communications deck and they don't go into storytelling? Does the fact that you go into storytelling make you stand out as an ESG strategist?
I love this question. It's not really something that I was thinking about before you said that. So it's opening up a lot of questions for me about connections that I could be building in a way of framing myself. I haven't even, to be honest, I haven't been using that title, ESG strategist, so it's more, it's just more that I have worked a lot with companies that work with natural materials, or are working with personal care, or working with community care, or nature, working with nature education centers and things like that. So I think framing myself in that way is an interesting space to explore a little bit more deeply. And also, I definitely know that there are lots of, as you know, I've been working with you in Creative Co to make this series about sustainability from childhood, where I've been talking to people within the In Creative Co community who all have a background in sustainability, and we've talked to people who have that are mechanical engineers and herbalists, and also work with sustainability strategy in a different capacity. And I definitely have seen through those conversations different ways that we could be collaborating, and a lot of it does feel like it has to do with storytelling, because there's a lot of sort of more practical skills based work that's being done, and I think the opportunity to tell stories around that work is really exciting and rich place to explore. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I feel like I'm actively exploring it now. Yeah.
Thank you, Jilly. What a wonderful answer to the question. I am going to move on to Catherine. A question from Yelly, In Creative Company co-founder. What comes after the communications audit? Can you explain your follow-up packages that help the company implement your audit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So after the communications audit, it basically ends with a presentation of the audit, and it ends with the recommendations. So you have the option to move on with the recommendations and follow them as you like, or you're able to continue working with me where we walk ourselves through the recommendations. So the first package is really a monthly it's basically a monthly retainer where I consult and strategize, and we pick through the recommendations and we prioritize them. What can we work on first, and kind of do a plan like that. And it's more like sort of like hand-holding and step-by-step along the way. Or you can do a communications plan that takes the recommendations, and I deliver an entire plan that focuses on all of your communication channels, what your messaging is, and basically what the strategies are for each of those things with a timeline, just kind of step by step on how that looks moving forward. So it kind of is like a go at your own pace type of thing. It's like if you want to take the recommendations and work with them on your own, you're able to. If you want to take your time through them with me, then we can do that too. And if you want me to tell you what to do next, then we can also do that as well. Thank you again for the question.
Thank you for the answer. Super excited to move on to William's question from Yelly and Creative Company co-founder. Can you give an example of you using creative facilitating during a client meeting?
Yes, I would love to be able to do that. So in the field of creative problem solving, there is a framework whereby you go through a series of steps, sequential in order, from defining your problem to generating ideas to selecting and strengthening your ideas to preparing to move into implementation and project management. So what facilitating one of these meetings would look like is getting analysis, starting with the problem definition, getting into the brainstorming process and or other ideation techniques, such as doing a warm-up and then generating as many ideas as possible to solve the challenge once it's been defined. And then from there, selecting what are the best, most promising ones, what can be turned into solutions. And from there, strengthening it, really analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, kind of like what Catherine was saying earlier about SWOT analysis, using a similar tool to make sure it's really well thought out and ready to be implemented, and then being able to help create that strategy moving forward. The area that I particularly like to focus upon and want to build upon this creative problem solving technique is that, as I mentioned before, there are certainly emotional and mental and even physical interactions between our desire to implement our dreams, to implement something new, and the fact that having a strategic plan, if you are not able to have the emotional capacity to handle ambiguity, to handle the risk, to be supported and feel safe in doing so, then you can do a lot of work without bringing that to fruition. So my own work would go beyond that to saying, doing a tool, something like fear setting by Tim Ferriss. You know, what are the fears you have around implementing this? How can we assess the reality of these fears in order to problem solve them and say, okay, let's think of what might go wrong and try and help alleviate that fear, or maybe see that it's really unfounded and that you're being held back for something that is an emotional block rather than an actual external thing that's going to be an obstacle for you. So I think that kind of holistic approach to problem solving, both the ideas, but also the self-leadership and ability to regulate emotions, is so critical to being able to facilitate that for a client and to be able to have the expertise and knowledge and application to help them really bring what they want to into the world.
Thank you, William. I truly appreciate your answer. That was so great. I love all of your answers today. Honestly, this was such an lively conversation. It really sparked so many insights and inspiration. I get so excited whenever I speak to any of you. You always have so much to share. And if you're looking for more, we do have another Creative Artrepreneur panel coming up in April. So we have Isa, and Isa is a type and graphic designer, Laurel, who is a writer, and Kulan, UX designer. So meet up with us again, April 28th. And there's a lot more. Don't worry. We've got others coming up too. April 15th, our Fab Friday field trip. And this is with Audrey, who is going to be doing a photography session for us. This is a member only event and something that will be a lot of fun to create some fun content. We also do an In Creative Good series. Yeli here is going to talk to Chadvi, who is on IG Live. So go to our IG Live page and check that out. We have a whole series there that's recorded for you. And then we have a creative pitch practice, co-working sprints, member mentoring sessions. And so if you'd like to find out more, it's at increative.co. Always remember, when your presence needs to go, think In Creative Co. So excited. Hope to see you again. Thank you so much for you spending this time with us today, and we'll see you back here. Bye. Bye, everybody.